Coogs house. Houston's got a lot of decisions to make this football season. Like, how much can they give the ball to DJ Butler? And which Houston is this Houston going to be? And what hotel will they stay at when they go to Arlington for the Big 12 title game?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars, and thank you for making Locked On Podcast Network the number one podcast network in the world. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a hater, Houston fan, hater came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Please make sure to listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. And join the conversation, but you don't know what to say. We typically talk about the opponent for this upcoming week, and I want to get into Auburn and basketball, but instead, I'll ask if you have a memory of Oakland basketball, Houston's Wednesday opponent, aside from that Golke guy. Tell us what it is in the comments down below. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's number one sports book. Right now, you put down $5, get $300 back in bonus bets. We got more on that fun later. I want to talk about the second watch guys I went through and really stood out on film. Couple surprises, couple not so much. I want to talk about which Houston team this Houston team is as Houston enters a late but important bye week, kind of refinding themselves in a lot of ways. And then I'll say it because y'all say it. I keep getting talks and texts and tweets and what do you call it on blue skies? People talking about, is this Houston team able to go to Arlington? What is the math? The math is slim, but it is there. And so we get into all that. But first, second watch studs. And usually these are guys we hadn't talked about enough or whatever. And I do think we talked about DJ Butler a lot in the post game. He had a really tremendous game, but he gets a second watch stud mark because I don't know that it's possible to have talked about him and his impact enough. 14 carries for 69 yards does not feel like it does it justice. What does, though, is that over 50 of those 69 yards came after contact. The guy just doesn't stop moving his legs and just keeps piles moving forward whenever he runs the football. Was really, really impressed by him. And admittedly, I've been sick all weekend, and maybe that's part of the fog or haze, and I just don't remember talking about him quite enough. But I felt like you can't talk about DJ Butler enough after the game he had on Saturday. I'm not saying I'm taking Dean Connors out of the starting role. I'm saying they're making a case of running a true multi-back offense in a way that I don't know that you could have said early in the season. Jermaine Burnett has not gotten his clock or run. Stacey Sneed he got a carry or two, I want to say, but this has really become a DJ Butler, Dean Connors, and then Conner Weigman with his own legs kind of race. And DJ Butler has firmly inserted himself in that with his efforts, right? There's not something handed to him. The guy went out and took it, and I want to make sure we give that credit where it's due. A lot of the running and a lot of the running plays that were successful down the stretch came on the right side of the line. And we are quick to dog the offensive line when it is not playing particularly well or when something is not going particularly well. And Dalton Merryman at right tackle and McKenzie Agnello at right guard, for all the dogging they get when things aren't going well over there, really deserve some praise here. Now, I will asterisk this with McKenzie Agnello's penalty at the end of the game could have cost Houston and probably should have cost Houston this football game. It did not, so we're operating as if it didn't, but there is a not-so-different alternate universe, obviously, where that penalty, the unsportsmanlike conduct on Houston's made field goal that set up a short field for UCF to respond with, that could have hurt Houston. It didn't. We play on, and so we're going to focus on his play the rest of the game, and both he and Merriman did a really good job. Those A-gap and B-gap runs on the right side seem to just get good push throughout this football game. And when we're quick, Dalton Merryman specifically, we are quick to dog that guy. He sticks out like a sore thumb. He's a giant, 6'9", right? Quick to jump in when things go wrong. We need to give him his flowers. He's playing well. He played a really strong. Both those guys played a really strong football game on Friday night. Amare Thomas, again, I feel like a lot of people are talking about him. And so maybe this feels like an odd choice for a second watch stud or whatever because people talked about him. I don't know on this post-game show if we did talk about him enough on Friday night. He is leading the Big 12 in receiving yards, had 5 catches for 103 and a touchdown in the UCF game. But I think what's interesting to me is that he is dominating the targets every week. It's not a secret that he's getting the football, especially since Stephon Boogie Johnson has gone down. More and more the targets are going his way. Every week it's in between a quarter and a half of the targets thrown by Conner Weigman. And I think that's really, really impressive when you frankly look at a offense that is better in the past game than it's been in a while, but still has its limitations. Amare Thomas is finding ways to get open against tight coverage and focused coverage on him every single week and making acrobatic, crazy kinds of catches along the way. Really, really impressed by Amare Thomas in this one and frankly every week thus far, but especially in this one on Friday. Now, in switching over the defense side of the ball, guys I thought stuck out. You can talk about Kentrell Webb and the safety. Will James had a couple big hits. I think we've talked about those guys, or we certainly did on Friday. And the secondary had a pretty strong game at different points. We talked about Trey Traylon and Trevion McCutcheon's big pick 6, right? Like that wasn't something we missed out on Friday night. So I want to stress that like the second watch studs for the defense did really feel kind of like guys that did not get enough shine. Like Carmycah Glass played like 30 snaps, and Carmycah Glass is a linebacker that is not necessarily shaped like a line, but he's playing like one and playing it really well. And I don't know that he can take snaps away from Sione Fotu or Jalen Garner. I think it's just a good problem to have. But Carmycah Glass is playing well to make you wonder if he needs more snaps. He's pursuing the football, chasing down the football. He's good in coverage. He only had a couple tackles in this one. Did have a sack. He makes me wonder though when he's chasing the ball around. Like, so in defensive football, coaching defensive football, you have like forcing it to your buddy kind of philosophies. Like, hey, I'm attacking at this angle, you're attacking on this angle, and the ball carrier's gonna get tackled by one of us. It's just whichever we got to be angle sound, gap sound, etc. Right? Carmycah Glass appears to be forcing things to his buddies, so to speak, a whole heck of a lot. And I think that that's a unheralded way to play defense, especially at the linebacker position. We think of like a bunch of tackles and stuff like that, right? He's doing his job at a high level. Really impressed by Carmycah Glass in this one. And then Eddie Walls. Eddie Walls is my other defensive second watch stud. Honestly, he has had better statistical weeks than he did this week. He had 1 tackle in this football game. This is not a filling up the stat sheet kind of game. He had 3 sacks against Arizona State, right? This is not his statistical best game ever. I continue to be impressed by and was thoroughly impressed in this football game by how well he plays the run. And frankly, in this football game specifically, how well he held it down in the run game, absorbing multiple blockers in a single play and letting some of those safeties and guys come down and make tackles. I probably should stop being surprised at some point while he's at Houston by those kinds of things. However, I'm not. His film coming in was this prolific pass rusher, and he's got great hands and feet and hips. But teams have kind of scouted that. He's not getting those kind of looks. What he's giving to Houston, though, is what makes him a guy you can't take off of the football field, is that Eddie Walls is standing up firm in the run game, much like Carlos Allen and Khalil Alfau, in a way that I don't know that Houston knew they were getting this guy when they went out and got him in the transfer portal from FIU. Really, really thoroughly impressed by Eddie Walls. Now, someone else I've been impressed by has been, frankly, the entire Houston Cougar football program. I want to talk about them and which Houston they might just be in the second segment. But before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Wayfair, because when it is time to get into the holiday season spirit, Wayfair is right there with everything you need. If it's time to get more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or other fun serveware, holiday hosting, etc., Wayfair's Black Friday sale is already here to help your space shine. The best part is you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday sale is happening all month long with over 70% off, up to 70% off of sofas, and spatulas and everything in between. I've told you guys, we got a house a little over a year ago. Every single week, it feels like you're finding some space you got to fill with something new. Wayfair is the place to do it. Don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com, shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale, and get up to 70% off right now. It's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends on December 7th. Bar games with Locked on Coogs here. And I think there's a very big conversation happening right now about what Houston is this Houston, for their first 8 games of the season, committed just 4 turnovers. In each of the last 2 games, they've committed 4 turnovers apiece, including a couple on special teams. Houston's a team that has beaten Arizona State at their place, but also went to overtime with I think they finally got a win over the weekend, or maybe a low-end Oregon State team, right? Houston's a team that's defense put up great numbers against, hard rushing attacks like Rice or otherwise, and has managed to fork over 40-something points to West Virginia, right? They buckled down in the red zone against Tech, but ultimately gave up big plays against Central Florida. Like, these things tend to happen in a weird kind of way. And so everyone's like wondering, which Houston is this Houston? And I think that's all very fair. But the most notable shift to me in the last 2 weeks for Houston versus prior to that has been the turnover issue. And admittedly, a large portion of that turnover issue does come from quarterback Conner Weigman. And I want to tout his toughness and how well he's running the football and how proud I am of him, of the things he's overcoming. And the second chance that Houston's offered him has been great, and all of that, right? However, it does look like the guy is holding on to the ball a lot and locking in on receivers and pass. He threw 3 picks to a single defensive back at UCF, and I feel like that guy kind of keyed in on some tendencies for sure. And I feel like the ball floats a lot now. And I will say, in this scouting report, as far back as when he committed to Houston, and I'd imagine if I were paying attention to him as an Aggie back when he was in high school, it wasn't quite I didn't quite zoom in on quite as much because he was not coming to Houston, looking at Houston quite as much at the time. He was a guy that's always floated the football. That's kind of been his MO. I won't say he's a shot putter, but he is more of that kind of a thrower of the football. And so when it's gotten worse for the last couple of weeks, it's like, okay, how much of this is being worse versus just who Conner is, and those because he's been effective before as a guy that floats the football some, and those kind of questions arise. The mention on the TV broadcast, which popped out to me when I watched it the second time on Sunday, but also I think is worth pointing out here, that they didn't quite confirm anything, but that he is a little dinged up. He runs the football hard and is essentially getting running back level carries per game at this point. And you wonder how much that has to do with, like, is it an elbow, a wrist, a forearm that's leading to something different with the ball grip? And my mind goes back to the West Virginia game, his fumble turnover in that one where he wheeled the ball back to throw and push it forward, right? And the ball slipped out on the way backwards. That almost implies to me some sort of a challenge holding on to the ball that would stem from something with your grip or holding it or whatever, right? So I don't know what that is, and frankly, I know one thing for sure: he's going to try and play through it till they tell him he can't, because that's who he's always been. That part is consistent, and frankly, we probably won't have any idea what this was or what is going on until much later. And frankly, there's also a chance that the play-by-play on Friday night was kind of overblowing whatever it is. I don't I don't want to speculate and report a bunch of stuff that isn't out there or whatever. I will say that the play-by-play guy kind of mentioned it in passing very subtly, as if it was not a big deal. If you watch kind of the last 2 weeks versus the 8 weeks prior, it definitely is a big deal. So I don't know. I don't know how you could make it not that, right? I also think, for what it's worth, that Houston, this offense, these receivers, etc., have more time on tape, and that time on tape is obviously like you've got to make adjustments and grow as an offense as the year goes on. Sometimes you hit speed bumps in that. Other teams get more video on you. They can bring more stuff down, yada, 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 right? All that kind of stuff. And so maybe those are all playing their own separate roles in the equation. Every variable is going to change something, right? I will say that it's been interesting that like he's kind of had these two receivers emerge in Koziol and Amare Thomas, and admittedly, Stephon Boogie Johnson is missed this most of the season injured and thus not been quite the same factor we hoped for at the start of the year. But you haven't really had a dominant third guy. It's sometimes Kobe's got a couple great catches. Harvey Broussard's got a couple great catches. Jaquise Martin's got one of the best catches of the season. Dean Conner probably has another one of the best catches of the season as a running back. You hadn't seen a real true third option emerge, but I don't know who to put that on necessarily, right? I just asked that question, who could be the third guy and why hadn't that guy emerged yet? Maybe the deal was that Stephon and Amari and Tanner was supposed to be a three-headed monster and you only got two of those. I think there's talent in the room that have it elsewhere, and so that's different. One thing that is for certain about when figuring out which Houston is the Houston, who are we really watching with these guys, is this team feels like they've got some road warrior mentality. They mentioned it after the game. I think it was the Trail McCutcheon I'd heard. It was somebody in the post game that they set a goal to win in white. You wear white on the road in football to win in white, right? And they seem to be like more focused and laser focused, zeroed in on, dialed in on, whatever metaphor you want to go to, on football games away from home in a way that's really, really interesting, I think. But look, they played in loud crowds at UCF. They got the loudest crowd at Oregon State that Oregon State really had outside of the Washington State game. Like they've had some really strong showings on the road in hostile environments. And frankly, for what it's worth, they also, right, we should be honest, they had good, game times against Central Florida for a Friday night game because it's not quite the same high school football atmosphere. Florida's got good high school football, I mean that, but like the Friday Night Lights thing is not quite a big deal there, as big a deal there. And then they played at Arizona State in like the primest of prime times locally, right? And so that draws a big crowd. I say that to say that it feels like this team being undefeated on the road is because they're playing well in front of good audience. And what's a shame there is obviously their like biggest home loss was to Texas Tech, and that was a sold out crowd, right? Crazy atmosphere. Over 42,000 people at that one and shoved into TDECU. And you kind of laid an egg. That kind of disputes the theory a little bit. But what I'm going here is that I do think that you see this team play well in front of an audience. And that does make things like the getting butts in seats conversation that has not escaped this program feel like a sore. No one in the program will say this if I ask them, and no one in this program has come out and telling me this or anything like that. Getting a top 25 ranking, having all the special things around Coach Hester, wearing a blackout to a blackout game, doing all that and showing up for West Virginia at 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning and walking out to a field that they say they sold 25,000 tickets to, but it did not look 25,000 people full. Like, I think that's got to be a little deflating. And I know that some of the conversation's been around game times. The game times are up to the Big 12, not up to Houston for Big 12 football games. Houston said 4 non-Saturday games. The two Big 12 games in that were, again, not really up to Houston. You had multiple 11 a.m. games within that as well. You've only had 2 Saturday night games, right? Really 2 Saturday, like not 11 a.m. games thus far, and one of those is on the road. And I don't want to make this out to be an excuse or the woe is me thing, because everyone's talking about the crowd size and whatever, and I don't want to sound like everybody else, although with the way my illness this weekend and my voice sounds and my occasional pausing to cough off mic, maybe I'd be benefiting from sounding like someone else right now. I do think, though, that showing up to UCF and them having a raucous crowd, or showing up to Arizona State and them having a raucous crowd, has helped this football team. They seem to play a little juiced. You see Kentra Webbling a big hit to end the Arizona State game and with a big pick to end the UCF game. I don't think those are accidents. Latrevion McCutcheon has played well in both those games. Eddie Walls with big sack numbers against Arizona State, or the second watch stud we talked about today. I don't think those kinds of performances are accidents. I think they happen in big, loud, chaotic environments. Kind of when some guys play their best ball, and we're seeing that those road wins have been where those things happen, right? And so maybe there's something to that. Maybe having an audience is a good thing. I know one thing: these senior day TC. I don't know what time of day. We don't know for a while what time of day the game will be or whatever. Houston deserves an audience for that one. And 8-2, well ahead of schedule in the rebuild, fighting their butts off. I mean, this program deserves an audience. So we'll see when and how that goes when we get there. I do want to talk to you guys a little bit more about what could potentially come next, and that is a trip to Arlington, which is not mathematically off the table. I'll stress it is not. It is not mathematically off the table. I'll talk about that in 1 second. Before we get there, I do remind you guys today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, because the NBA is back, college basketball is back, hockey, college football, pro football, all in action at one time. No better place to get on the action than with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. And so, even if you missed the start of the game, want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine live game bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving customers $300 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up. Play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome, Locked on Coogs. Parker Ainsworth here, talking about Houston and their potential trip to Arlington for a Big 12 championship game. It's not off the table, folks. It's very much mathematically possible. And I don't want to lie to you. A big part of this is that Houston only has 2 conference games left. Texas Tech is 6-1. BYU is 5-1. Theoretically, if they both went out, they would rematch, right? That's just the way that it goes. No one else in the conference has just one loss except for Cincinnati, but BYU plays Cincinnati, and so BYU winning out would give them a second loss, right? That's just the math, the way the thing maths right now. Now, if Houston were to win out, and that would involve being TCU and Baylor, we'll talk about how this goes with all of that. They are not mathematically eliminated yet. There are multiple teams standing at 5-2. If Cincinnati, however, were to beat BYU and win out, they'd be the lone 8-1 team. Then Texas Tech winning out would make them 2 8-1 teams. They'd play each other in Arlington. But if Cincinnati were to beat BYU and then lose to Arizona or TCU, and then Utah were to win out, Arizona State were to win out, and Houston were to win out, then suddenly you'd have almost a half dozen teams, all right, tied at 7-2 in conference play, all vying for a chance to play Texas Tech, who would be sitting at 8-1 in conference play, right? Now, if somehow you get BYU and Cincinnati to 6-3, things shake up differently. But right now, if you have, make sure BYU, Cincy, Arizona State, Houston, Utah, if you have all 5 of those teams at 7-2 in conference. Okay, work with me. All 5 of those teams at 7-2 in conference, and Texas Tech at 8-1 in conference. Then right now, the team to go to Arlington would be the Utah Utes, right? Because the ultimate tiebreaker there would come to strength of schedule and wins against common opponents and so on, right? That would break down in their favor, right? If Cincinnati and BYU were to both somehow finish at 6-3, like a loss to TCU here and a loss to Arizona there, or however that flips for them, right? And then you have Arizona State, Utah, and Houston all 7-2. The strength of schedule would actually send Arizona State, because they beat the common opponents that beat both Utah and Houston, even though Houston beat Arizona State, right? That's it's weird. That's the series of tiebreakers here, but in a three-way tiebreaker, if Arizona State's involved, they're going to get the nod against most teams because Tech is going to have beaten most teams in the Big 12 title race, right? Right now, TCU is just playing spoiler. This time a week ago, they kind of felt like they had a shot at it, but they do play Cincinnati, Houston, BYU to finish their season, and thus could really do some actual spoiling in the course of this, right? Them beating BYU might not only ruin BYU season, it could also ruin Arizona State's or ruin Utah's or ruin Houston's, right? Based on how these random tiebreakers would go. I would also point out that in all of these tiebreakers, in the 3s and the 4s and the 5 teams tied at 7-2 or whatever, right? That involves Houston winning the rest of their games. They've got to get that done. That's the part that they can control. But B, the thing that's going to hurt Houston is they actually had a relatively easy strength of schedule within the conference, right? As we mentioned, the strength of schedule plays a role here. I've said that throughout the weeks here on Locked On Cougs. But for references to this race, Utah is presently at 32nd and Houston is presently 70th, right? And so though Houston and Utah didn't play each other, based on strength of schedule in most tie-breaking scenarios, and those would move a little bit, right? The last couple games here, if Houston blows out TCU, that might help theirs a little bit because the SOS moves up when you have above an average margin of victory and things like that. But the gap between 32nd and 70th is so big that truthfully, Houston kind of needs Utah to lose another football game because they don't kind of compare well with Utah. Really, the best case scenario for Houston would be for it to somehow come down to a 7-2 Houston and a 7-2 Arizona State in the conference play, that is. And Houston's got the head-to-head. If it's a two-team race, it does come down to head-to-head. So that's the little bit different thing there for Houston. All this shapes up into a weird deal. I do think that Houston having the second latest bye week in the conference, bye week this week, Tech's is actually next week. So Tech has the latest bye week in the conference, but Houston has the second latest bye week in the conference this week. So they only have 2 games remaining. They can heal up, rest up, get ready, and see how this race continues to unfold over the course of the week. Houston only has to win twice. The rest of these are talking about have to win 3 times. That's a little bit different, right? The ultimate shame in all of this, though, is that if you just taken care of business against West Virginia, throwing 1 or 2 less interceptions, maybe you caught that punt and taken that drive back for a touchdown or whatever the case may be, right? If you just taken care of business against West Virginia, you'd have 1 loss and be in the driver's seat right now. Now, people have hypothesized online that if you had beaten West Virginia, you probably don't come back and beat UCF, and the way the football works and the football gods. That's probably true, but ultimately, it mathematically would help right now to have that win. You'd be in the driver's seat. You would be the one in control. You'd be you'd have 2 loss. You'd have 1 conference loss and just 2 games remaining. You would be in. You could lose a game to get into this tiebreaker scenario, right? Now, all of that being said, I don't know that any of it matters, right? Tiebreaker this, tiebreaker that. Can Houston get in? Can Houston not get in? It'd be great to get to play in Arlington. Don't get me wrong. However, this rebuild is already ahead of schedule. Being 8-2 with a chance to go 10-2 in Willie Fritz's second year, I don't care who you schedule. I don't care who you got at quarterback. I don't care what you got coming in. There is no way in December of 2023, if you'd have told someone you were 18 months away from a 10-2 season in this program, they'd have believed you. That again, I feel like I'm fairly optimistic. I'm sitting here talking about going to Arlington potentially in a mathematical kind of scenario. I feel like I'm a pretty optimistic fan. I can tell you very, very thoroughly that was not something I saw coming. Now, in telling people in the Big 12 group chat or whatever, the Locked On Big 12 group chat in the offseason, like, no, Houston's got a shot to go. It's always been in the cards, but it was never where I was going to put my money on it, right? Like, that's just not it's just unfathomable that that's where this program already is. And frankly, look, disappointment against West Virginia aside, I do think there have been moments we've seen this season beating UCF at the end, showing up against Arizona State. Frankly, coming back after the Tech game and winning the next week, beating Arizona like you did, the toughness you had to show down the stretch of that one. Those are moments this program lacked previously. This program is defiantly in a much, much better place with multiple wins like that than I think any of us thought they would be in right now. And yes, from a calculus math perspective, if Houston wins out, they have a chance to go to the Big 12 title game. That is not, and it's not like a 0.0001. It is a real mathematical chance. Probably won't happen. Don't put your mortgage on it. It is a mathematical chance. That being said, I don't want the inevitable BYU wins out, so it's not up to us anyway kind of scenario to minimize anything else that's been done this season. I don't think that's fair to anyone in this program that has done so much in this turnaround over the last 18 months. Yes, the Big 12 title game is there. And yes, if BYU wins out, they'd have one loss. If you just beaten West Virginia, you get a shot to be a one-loss team too. And that would have changed some of the strength schedule stuff because you would have beaten West Virginia, the SOS changes, whatever. But ultimately, as disappointing as that one Saturday was, if you can play 12 Saturdays this year and only have 2 losses, I think that's a pretty good sign, especially when you bring in the Keyshawn Henderson class 2026, especially when you bring in the transfer portal class that's coming this winter, especially when you bring in the 2027s and 8s that see what's being built and want to jump on the train. All of that is where this is going. We'll be here at Locked On Coogs to break down each day that it's moving. I'm Mr. Locked On Coogs. Thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day, making Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Thank you all so much again. For the very second listen, go to check out Locked On Big 12, the latest all around the conference and who Drake thinks is going to Arlington as well. This has been always will be Locked On Coogs. Go Coogs.